change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Today I'm here with Dr. Douglas Jackson, who leads Project C.U.R.E, the world's largest distributor of donated medical supplies, delivering approximately 200 semi-truck-sized containers per year to hospitals and clinics in more than 135 countries. Founded by his father in 1987 after a trip to Brazil, Project C.U.R.E operates with about 35 paid staff and 30,000 volunteers. It's been ranked by Forbes as one of the top 20 most efficient charities in America. And Douglas holds a JD and PhD from University of Colorado. He served as a university provost and received the Princess Prize for Innovative Philanthropy from Prince Albert of Monaco. He's a fellow of the Aspen Institute, among many other incredible accolades. Stay tuned for an incredible episode that will talk about what it's like to start a nonprofit in a garage and scale it to a global level that has made a life-saving difference for millions of people all over the world. Welcome, everyone, to the Fundraising AI Podcast. I believe this is episode 82. It's great to be here. And, we don't do this a lot, but today we have a special guest, and I'm really, really excited about it. As I was getting to know their organization, which I'd heard about for many years, and I'll kind of explain how and why. But when I was getting to read this bio, Dr. Douglas Jackson, I became really excited about this opportunity. Now, a way of background on this is that Microsoft has supported fundraising AI for a number of years. And I had a conversation with them recently, and I'm like, who from kind of in the Microsoft ecosphere would you like to highlight on the Fundraising AI podcast at some point? And it was this kind of unanimous decision. And so Dr. Douglas Jackson was like the first one on the list. I don't know if he knew this or what he did to deserve this, but they all uniformly believe like, oh, if we could pull this off, you should interview Project C.U.R.E, because it's an amazing organization. So I'm here with Dr. Douglas Jackson. I don't know, Doug, do you go by Doug, Douglas, Dr. Douglas Jackson? I'm happy to do any of those during the entire podcast.
I always say, just don't call me late to dinner, right? So yeah, Doug's fine.
Okay, great. Well, as someone whose name is mispronounced 99% of the time is Nathan Chappell, I have to remind people that it's like Dave Chappelle, and that it tends to be the only way they can actually remember my last name. So Doug, it's great for you to join me here, to spend a little bit of time with us. It's exciting to think about your work is transcending the nonprofit sector to the private sector. Organizations like Microsoft are paying attention, seeing something inspiring and innovative out of Project C.U.R.E. Just to get us started, do you have any sense of why that is? I mean, have you been in deep partnership with Microsoft? Have you co-created things together? Is there something that just really stood out to them in terms of, you being kind of the darling of the nonprofit world for them?
Well, I tease them that we all started in a garage. My mom and dad started Project C.U.R.E in a garage in 1987. Which they got started in a garage. All the best rock bands in the world got started in a garage. So I tease them about that a little bit. I don't think that's really the answer, but it's a fun answer. Now, we found ourselves a few years ago in a situation where we had spreadsheets for everything. And we wanted to keep track of the countries we had shipped to, so we'd put all that on a spreadsheet. We got really sophisticated. We made it a pivot table.
Wow, yeah.
And then we wanted to keep track of the mileage on our trucks, so we started another spreadsheet. We wanted to keep track of our volunteers and volunteer hours, so we started a spreadsheet. Our inventory was on a spreadsheet until it got too big, and then we used Access, right? And what the problem is it didn't talk to each other. We kept losing big chunks of data, and people were spending lots of time copying this cell and pasting to that cell. And I like to say the guy with two watches never really knows the time, because you don't know which watch is right, right? And so that's where we found ourselves. So we just decided, rather than sort of hodgepodge a whole bunch of stuff together, let's just embrace the Microsoft tech stack in its entirety. So we moved everything off of Zoom, and we went to Teams. And in fact, our whole voice system now, all of our telephones are Teams. We started working with a CRM, and we kind of got a little ways into that. And one of the donor software platforms said, well, why aren't you guys on on fundraising and engagement. And I said, because I didn't know there was a fundraising and engagement. So that took us down this other path, and we went down there, and then Microsoft was working on that. And so we made that shift with them. And along the way, I hired a group called Wifley, and they became our implementation partner, and they've just done a fantastic job. And so then we had SharePoint, and we had all this stuff. And I mean, it was a huge investment for an organization our size, but we did it. And the cool thing is it worked. And so we went back to Microsoft and said, "Hey, look what we just did with all your stuff," and I think they liked it.
Right.
So here we are.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've gotten to know some of the Microsoft folks for a while, like Jeremy Pittman and others who've actually done podcasts with. And Virtuous is actually on a Microsoft backbone as well, and has helped co-created things. They seem to be an organization, for as big as it is and complex as it is, it actually cares. There's an entire group of people that really care about how their products are being used to better society. So it's great to hear that. Now, you have this incredible background. You could be doing a lot of things. Well, in fact, you've done a lot of things in your life, and you're, from practicing law to serving as provost to, I mean, it's like you're just a wide range. But you find yourself today as basically leading this international NGO doing all these things. And I know there's a really incredible story behind that. I'd love for you if you took the listeners back to the garage for a minute and just kind of that original inspiration of your dad seeing a need, filling a need in his garage. And then, somewhere along the way that went from this little idea to something that truly has scaled to a massive level. And then you came in and are, shepherding the next phase. So I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, we were talking earlier that we didn't really intend on getting into the nonprofit thing. I certainly didn't. When I was a little kid, my dad got involved in real estate here in Colorado and developed a couple of ski areas west of here. One was Winter Park, and the other one was a little bit of West Vail. And that was in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was kind of hard not to make money at that point.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And if you were good, you could make a lot of money at that point, and he did. And so my dad and mom kind of figured out a lesson to life, and that is you can be rich and not happy. And they had everything they wanted to buy, the big Mercedes and the house and the this and the that. And my folks decided to put all of that into a foundation and give it away. And that was about my senior year in high school. And that's kind of a sobering thought when you realize that there is no inheritance for you.
Was that, was this a surprise to you, or their character did it seem like a natural extension? You still may not have agreed with it, but did it seem like a natural thing that they would do, or was it completely out of the blue?
Probably a little of both. I mean, my dad was one of those people who just always, to this minute, we were just up there over the weekend at their house, same house, but he's always wanted to do the right thing by other people. And he's one of those people, he's a man of faith, and he just decided that he's going to live it out. This is what it really looks like day to day to day. So that part of it didn't surprise me. I think as he kept giving things away, I was like, wait, he just gave that away too, you know? But he figured out that not all of our assets belong in our back pocket. You've got assets between your ears. You've got things that you have, experience, know-how, and all of that. So he started doing economic consulting in Zimbabwe first, and then ended up in Brazil. And it was when he was in Brazil that his interpreter was a medical student, and he ended up going to a little favela clinic, and there was nothing in it, and it just tore his heart out. And he came back to Denver, told that story to a buddy named Greg Lowe, and Greg had a medical wholesale company and gave my dad and mom enough stuff to fill both sides of their garage full of medical supplies. Paid to ship that to Brazil, and that was really truly how we started. I was off on my own path. I decided that I just wanted to make $1 more than I could spend. My dad did it, then I could do it. And so I went to be a lawyer, practiced with a judge for a short time, and did some real estate law, and then ended up as in-house counsel for a big ag manufacturing company outside of Chicago. And we made big steel storage silos and automated feeding systems. We invented white plastic horse fence. We got bought by a guy named Warren Buffett in Nebraska. And I just fell in love with this whole merger acquisition thing. So I went back and I did a PhD in finance. And in the meantime, my dad's doing this thing, where he's shipping this stuff off to Brazil. And then Hurricane Mitch hits Honduras, and then the Soviet Union comes apart, and now he's got a tiger by the tail. So I thought my big give back in life was going to San Diego and teaching college. And so I did that for 5 years. Anyway, long story short, I was ready to go back and do hedge funds in New York. And my dad said, I could use your help here at Project C.U.R.E. And at the time, he had about 12 volunteers.
Mm.
And the total top line was about $100,000. And we got a $70,000 grant to hire me and my friend Dave and our friend Doreen. Doreen was going to do all of the marketing PR. Dave was going to help with the volunteers. I was going to do, the rest of it. And when the money ran out, we were going to go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
I was headed off to Lower Manhattan,
Right.
Anyway, money never ran out and the challenges just kept coming. And so that was in 1997.
Okay.
And then I've been here ever since.
That's an amazing story because you had the experience of both sides. And I think you can appreciate that. It was interestingly enough, my background, I was a technologist, started and sold 2 tech companies. I sold my second company to go to Madison Avenue. I decided I wanted to work in marketing and branding.
Sure.
And I took about a year and a half off after I sold my company going to grad school. And that's when I started serving at a local Boys and Girls Club, and our director quit. And I was too young and naive enough not to say no. So I just kept on doing it. And to your point, the challenge is, if you like a challenge, I mean, there's nothing like
Right.
nonprofit sector to provide you all the biggest challenges with the least amount of resources. That's truly the ultimate challenge. What an amazing journey that you experienced, and then have seen just tremendous growth. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the growth, and then I want to get into your kind of view on innovation, and even now in the world of AI, how you evaluate good versus bad AI, and also just how you're even thinking about what is AI's ability to help impact mission in the future. But I was reading some things on your website as well in terms of, so you're delivering 240-foot containers a year across 135 countries. That, like, if we can step back from that just for a second, I mean, that just seems like an enormous, from a logistical point, right? An enormous feat in itself to like know where things are at, to know how they get there, to how they get distributed on the back end. And with all that said, and correct me if this is wrong, but you have something like 30,000 volunteers in the world and not that many employees in comparison. How do you, and then with that, you've been, I actually, which rating service, but you're basically classified as like one of the most efficient charities in America. So you've done something that most other organizations could not do. You figured out how to scale, but also keep your bottom line very, very, very healthy in terms of your expense ratio. So I'm just boggled by how you can do so much with what some charities might seem or might consider so little. So what's the approach to kind of your business model?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of pieces to that. I tell my team all the time here that, the only difference between us and every other business in the world is we don't pay tax. All the other rules apply, right?
Mhm.
Top line's got to be bigger than your expenses, or you have no bottom line. If you have no bottom line, you don't stay in business. So I came at this from the very beginning, thinking about everything I learned in finance school. And we kind of look at it, even though we're a nonprofit, that doesn't mean that all the best practices of a group like Microsoft shouldn't apply to you too. They should, right?
Mhm.
And you got to get really good at it. In fact, I think as nonprofits, we have a moral imperative to even be better at it because what we're doing is the right thing to do.
Sure.
I mean, that's why we do it. Not saying that nobody else's is, but different than making burgers,
Sure,
right?
for sure.
So that's kind of the first thing, is just that mindset. The other piece of mindset is that I just believe that there's a whole lot of good people in the world. I'm not one of those people that believes that everybody started out good. I do think there's bad people. I've met some of them at the end of a gun, but there's just a lot of good people. And my job partly is to open up a pathway for those people to come and do their good work alongside of our good work. So when you look at it that way, I had this interesting experience. The guy that used to be the CEO at Gates Rubber, back in the day, all fan belts on all cars in America were made by Gates Rubber. And they had a huge tire division too. And they were headquartered right here in Colorado. They got bought by a British company and it's, different. But anyway, the last CEO is a guy named Don Miller. And he was a super nice guy. I'd met him over at Cherry Hills Church, and he said, Doug, he said, I got some time on my hands. Anything I can do to help you? And I said, yeah, you want to drive the truck? And I was kind of being a little bit flippant.
Sure.
And he said, yes. And then there was another guy who was the co-founder at JD Edwards. His name was Greg Dixon. And Greg, they got bought by PeopleSoft and then Oracle. So Greg had done pretty well. And he came over and he was helping. One day I'm working with both of those guys. And the thought just hit me that in any parallel universe, I would be really lucky. I could take all the teeth out of the front of my face just for the opportunity to go to work for either one of those guys.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, it's like, you know what? That puts a whole different spin on volunteers.
Right.
And so I've always been a careful steward of everything, including money, but that's also volunteer time. That's resources. That's just a lot of things. And I mean, I got people who don't agree with it. I've got somebody who, he got really angry with me. He's one of my other volunteers, but he thought I should hire a whole lot of people. And I'm like, you mean so we can go broke?
Right. Yeah. Well,
that makes sense.
For a lot of organizations, managing volunteers is a hard thing, and keeping them engaged in the mission and all of that. So for you to mobilize a network of volunteers all over the world, I love the fact that I saw in some interview where you were talking about the idea that Project C.U.R.E is a 35-year-old startup, and kind of that sense of just, I don't know, to me that conjures like a sense of like an appetite for change and for innovation and to keep things kind of fresh. Where there, as you and I both know, there's a lot of legacy type of organizations that went to scale and then they don't exist anymore. But to have that kind of appetite where you're curious about what can you do next. And so if we kind of transition that conversation into that sense of what does that mean to you, a 35-year-old startup? And specifically because this is the Fundraising AI podcast. And by the way, we're not advocates for AI, we're advocates for responsible, beneficial AI, that's why Microsoft has sponsored us for the last couple of years. What does it mean to be a 35-year-old startup in a world where everything is changed and everything is possible, and we're all just on this crazy journey right now?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'd love to think that we're scrappy and entrepreneurial and that we can see things coming and we can make a quick turn and meet that opportunity head on. I've been really reluctant to build a very deep hierarchy. We're pretty flat. So we got 36 paid staff and 35,000 volunteers.
That's incredible.
35,000. We'll close our fiscal year here at the end of May, and we will have done 250 semi-truck trailers.
Wow.
Right. So that's one every working day of the week with all of these great people. And we got volunteers that have worked with us for 25 years.
Wow.
And when you look at that level of commitment, I tell people everybody gets paid. It's just that a few of us get paid in cash.
Right.
But there's some climb up Maslow's hierarchy or whatever you want to think about it as. I love Daniel Pink's work about drive, where he says, hey, people don't really work for money. They work for purpose. They work for self-mastery. They work for autonomy. If you give them too much money, it actually ruins them, And so even you talk to really, really wealthy, very successful people, they'll tell you that. It's like money ceased to be the motivating factor at some point. Now I just want to do that better.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, so that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to keep those early days alive of any organization where you're quick to respond. You're a little bit scrappy. Where you come in, we make our own sandwiches. There's very little bureaucracy. Try to get people to think and make the decisions that they should make, that you would make. So don't come ask me all the time. You make the right decision to start with, and we're good.
So your work start around kind of formalizing the business and the operation side, tracking data, recognizing that data had value, not only by itself, but when it was connected to other data. That was essentially my process in around 2017. I didn't know quite how we were going to start making decisions on all of that data, yet I started working in AI around 2017, 2018 at a cancer hospital. And same thing, we had data in all these different areas. And I just knew in my bones that there was going to be value in making better decisions that way. So you bet, obviously, the right way. I'm curious, where is that paid off at Project C.U.R.E? That, not just knowing that you can sleep at night because you haven't lost a bunch of spreadsheets, but where is it paid off in terms of, whether it's fundraising or operations or other areas within the organization?
Yeah, when you've got a bunch of volunteers moving this cell to that cell, it doesn't matter how good. I think I fat finger stuff all the time. And I biff and I type the wrong thing in. Sometimes it's my own name, and that's going to happen. So I think one of the things, obviously the time crunch was a big help to us because we're thin. Even with that many volunteers, not all of those volunteers are involved in data. Most of them moving stuff around in the warehouse. So we had to get that piece right. And I can tell you stories about, I mean, annual end of year holiday giving campaigns, and we biffed. I mean, I'd send a note to you and it would say, "Dear Carol." You'd be like, who the heck is
Yeah.
Carol? Yeah, right. And this is my address, but that's not, and it was just, I mean, we messed it up so bad. And every time that would happen, it'd be like, okay, we're not doing that again.
Right. Right.
A waste of time, a waste of money. Everybody looked stupid. My volunteers felt bad, and we would get, those gray boxes. They're about a foot by 3 feet, and they put all your return mail in there. I walked into the conference room, and we probably had 40 of those boxes,
Oh
and
my
I was
gosh.
just like,
Wow.
holy hell, what just happened?
Yeah.
And you don't want to get mad at people, but it's like, where did the system break? And it was a broken system. And so we were able to really address a bunch of that stuff. And then here's the really cool part. Every time we ship a container, before we ship, we always go do a needs assessment, which means that somebody from here, my dad started doing these because he didn't know what he was doing medically. I didn't, so I just kept on. But every time we do that, we go and sit down with the doctors and the nurses, and we ask questions, and we say, okay, so walk me through the process. A woman comes in here to have a baby. What happens to her?
Yeah.
Can I go see the labor and delivery room? Do you guys need delivery tables? I don't see any incubator. What happens to that little bit? How do you keep the baby warm? Caroline, my daughter, went to Africa, and she looked over there, and there was a sort of pile of rags, and she asked, what's that? Well, there's a baby stuck behind there, and the reason they put this big pile of rags there so the little baby didn't roll off the table. And she's like,
Wow.
Dad, can you believe this? I mean, and it's, yeah. So anyway, so we do all of that. So now we know the name of the hospital, the address of the hospital, the name of the hospital administrator, his head of pediatrics, his head of OBGYN, all of their emails. We know what the catchment area is of the hospital. In other words, what the population size is that this hospital serves. How many people came in the last year? How many people were hospitalized? How many babies were born? What's the cesarean rate? Who fixes the equipment? What's their electric grid? We know all of that information. How do you keep track of all of that?
Right.
That's what this does for us. And then we can go back and say, okay, based on all of that, here's all the content of what is inside that container.
Right.
A semi-truck fitter, what's inside? How many needles and syringes exactly? Because the guy at customs, if he pulls that box off and it's a bad count, he'll quarantine the entire container.
Right. Right.
That's a bad day. So we know all of that. We know who signed for it. We know the consignee. We know the ship that it sailed on. We know who drove the truck to get it from the port to the hospital. We know all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're keeping track of it in red file folders,
Sure.
done. There's just no way. You can do that on up to about 50, 60 containers a year. But when you get 250,
right. Well,
it's not going to work.
And, you owe it to donors who are either giving financially or through their time, but anyone who's donating supplies. Of course, you wouldn't be around if there was a history of just like, well, we think it got there. We're not quite sure. It might have got stuck somewhere else and it might have never been delivered. You have to be able to account for that. And, for you to be able to do that in spades is huge. And it just creates trust, right? That's essentially what you're doing to making sure. As you were saying, the experience that your daughter had, in about, 26 years ago now, I was in India for 6 weeks doing a polio eradication, kind of more of an educational type thing, because we were, deep in polio eradication at the time. And they were starting to lose faith in whether it could be eradicated. And so a lot of us from Rotary would go out there and spend some time as ambassadors and just encourage people and eat with people and go door to door and talk with folks. And I remember visiting a hospital while I was there, and this hospital had no windows, no skylights. It was dark. They could only do surgery basically in broad daylight where enough sun would come in through the door. A fluorescent light that was basically hanging from one screw. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just can't even imagine being sick and needing surgery here. And when I had left India, I actually got really sick. We did a layover in France. And the night that we got to France, I actually got pretty sick. And I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, how blessed am I that I'm not in India. And you see this every day, right? And I don't think most people have a visual of some of the conditions that, when my father-in-law would go to, who's a retired clinician, would go to a place like in Nigeria, and people would line up. They'd find out that a physician was coming. They would line up. They'd walk a few days to get there. He had no medical supplies. There's nothing sterile anywhere around, no medication he could give them. All he could do was hold their hand and just look them in the eye and say that they were loved. And the work that you're doing takes that and then provides the modern miracles that we have in medicine and devices. That it's just so real for me right now as you're describing what you're doing. It's just amazing. So.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of these docs are great. I mean, I've run into docs, you're talking about Nigeria, oh yeah, well, I went to XYZ medical school. I did my residency at Howard in Washington, D.C. My brother is a chief of surgery in Baltimore and all of this stuff. And I was like, why are you back here?
Right.
Because these are my people.
This is what
I came
matters.
back to take care of my people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that guy, you just want to help that guy. It's just like, what can I get you to take care of these people? And yeah, if I could find it, I'll go get it. I'll bring it to you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as a 35-year-old startup, you've been on this journey, you've got data, you've got a partnership with Microsoft or do some things with them. We're living in a world where the most hardworking, resource-constrained organizations on the planet, which are pretty much represented in every nonprofit, have access to technology that knows something about everything, can seemingly do anything, and more than anything, can allow us to rethink what's possible. I think that's where I spend a lot of time talking about curiosity, spending time away from technology so I can dream bigger. Are there things that you're experimenting with, playing with, or anticipating that AI will change your approach and how you do the things that you've already done really well?
Yeah, there are. Do you read Seth Godin?
Yeah.
I love Seth. In fact, I ran into him. He was speaking at a conference in Utah, and I told him, I said, every morning I get up and I read a scripture and I read Seth Godin, and not exactly in that order.
Right. I love it.
But he always talks about using AI to help humanity, and that's kind of become my sort of rule of thumb is, does this help somebody? Not does this make it easier on me, right? And when you start looking at that, it started opening up some cool opportunities. I give you one, for instance, that I'm dreaming about. We're not there. We're getting there. But way back in the day, somebody would give us an X-ray machine or an ultrasound or something like that, right? And it would have a little plastic envelope, and it would have all of the instruction manual and the repair manual and the installation manual and everything. So we'd button all that up and make sure that it was all there, and we'd ship it off to make sure that they had the right stuff. And about 2 weeks later, we get the same model of ultrasound machine without the repair manuals. About the third time that happened, I went around, why don't we just start doing a photocopy of all these things? Let's keep them.
Right.
And then somebody said, well, why don't we keep the original and then we'll send the photocopy? I said, well, okay, that's even better. And so we did that for a long time. We had these big books racks full of manuals, And then I had a guy who had a little community service time to do. And he came in and he set up about 6 or 8 scanning machines.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, Doug, I can scan all these in for you. So that's what he did. And he literally would go one machine with one manual, the next one, get down to the end. He'd flip the page, do the next one. And he's down in the warehouse for weeks. I mean, just scanning all these manuals in. So we felt like we were pretty smart, because then we could take that manual, we could put it on a CD-ROM. About that time, somebody else was doing that, and they were open sourcing it, which then all of the manufacturing companies got really upset, because they said, that's our intellectual property. You can't just open source that to the world. So he got his pantsuit off. So I thought, okay, we're going to be really careful. So we went from CD-ROM to thumb drives. And about that time, then literally this guy came down from Lockheed Martin. They're not too far from here. And that's where they design intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? These guys are honestly rocket scientists. And this guy, he'd retired and he came over to volunteer with us. And they said, well, why don't you fix the centrifuge? Well, the centrifuge is this little desktop unit that spins test tubes, right? It's got the same thought process behind a generator out of a 1955 Chevy pickup. It's just an armature. And anyway, I said, why did you fix this? Oh, I don't know anything about fixing medical equipment. Like, dude, 2 months ago, you were making guidance systems for rockets. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You could do this. Well, anyway, so we got these manuals and we said, oh, just look it up. It's right here. So here's what AI gives us. This gives us the ability, the first time to take all of that intellectual property, put that all in. So I just make a query and I say, how do I fix a monitor?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back and it says, here's the top 10 things that you need to do. If it's a Toshiba, do it this way. If it's a Panasonic, do it that way. If it's a GE, do it this way. Right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the really cool thing. I can also take that and I can attach that to an avatar who looks like me, or if I'm a West African female, looks like her and speaks with a West African dialect,
Yeah.
and will tell her exactly how to fix that with video
In her language. Yeah. Yeah.
in her language,
Yeah.
so that she understands it and it's looking like she's talking to her sister.
Yeah.
How cool is that? And so if we can teach the rocket scientist,
Mm-hmm.
we can teach a 28-year-old girl in West Africa how to do the same thing. Now you just opened a huge opportunity for her.
Yeah.
Because she can get a job doing anything now.
Right.
How cool is that? We were talking about, we invented a cervical cancer screening program. And we were just talking earlier about, we met a guy that took 50,000 ACL, MCL knee surgeries, right? And they're all done on a scope, so it's already recorded. Anyway, he paired those with good outcomes and bad outcomes. And he put it in goggles, and you can sit and watch. The surgeon can watch what angle that screw is going into the knee. And it, if he's right at the right angle, it's green. If he gets off the angle, it turns red. So he knows exactly where to put it in based on all this evidence. Well, why can't you do that with cervical cancer screening in Peru?
Yeah.
And the answer is you can. We need more data points, but we could do that so that if that doctor or nurse in Peru is looking at it, there's a doctor or nurse sitting up here, or even better, that doctor or nurse is asleep.
Right.
And the machine is saying, oh, yeah, that's cancer. Take care of it this way, or nah, don't worry about that one. She's going to be fine.
Yeah. I mean, so you're giving an example of how AI truly is transforming historically what you've done, which is providing that last mile of access to medical care, or not medical care in the sense of clinicians, but from a sense of like the devices and all the things. And you're just putting it into practice. I mean, that is really incredible to think of how AI will transform healthcare, and that Seth Godin, he has such a passion for nonprofits in general. He's just always been so kind and generous with a lot of friends of mine that he's appeared and spoke about these things. It's amazing. That's awesome. I mean, I just love the kind of imagination that you're exercising to think of like, well, why can't we just do it that way? And that's where AI, I think, just brings up just so many new opportunities for organizations to scale, and not necessarily at a one-to-one expense of like, well, if we're going to do that program, we have to hire 100 new people to figure that out. And this is just something that changes that ballgame a lot.
Right. Well, and likewise, the data, it used to be okay for us to go to one of our partners and say, oh, well, we shipped 250 containers.
Right.
And then somebody asked the question, well, so what?
Right.
Oh, well, let me figure that one out.
Right.
Well, the really cool thing is now, not only the data that we collect, but you can correlate that to data that's coming out of the WHO, and that's correlated data that's coming out of the Ministry of Health and all these things, and you get a really good picture exactly what it is that's happening as a result of what you're doing, right? Tie it into people's cell phones. There's some really cool programs, for example, where a mom, when she's pregnant, and most of the developing world has skipped over the landlines, right? They never strung copper because people would steal the copper. They just went straight to cell phone. Well, every morning there's a picture of what that little fetus would look like, what her baby looks like, what she should do, what she should eat, how far she should walk, and it comes as a drip campaign on her cell phone. It's time to go to the hospital.
Right.
It's time to go see your doctor. It's time to not walk anymore. Just take it easy. Sit on the chair. You're going to be okay. But anyway, here's all the things you need to bring to the hospital when you come. All of that comes out. Why can't you do that at scale? And the answer is you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing you were talking about with where it was the medical advice was delivered in a language and a dialect, it's really interesting because I've not been a fan of bots portraying themselves as humans in general sense, and because it could be manipulative. And then I was in Geneva last year, and there was a small organization that I believe it was in Kenya, and they were sharing this example of how they create this digital nurse to be able to be on an iPhone, because there's such skepticism of, say, a white doctor or a white nurse giving you advice or medical advice, that these moms would just choose not to get the medical care versus having some kind of educated kind of response. So they were able to do this and deliver it, and found that, child mortality rate went way, way up, that they were getting the advice that they needed. And it was literally just a technological platform that was able to deliver the same advice, but in a way that would be more accepted. So yeah,
Right.
provides just lots of opportunities.
We did a project a few years back with Mirth for Moms and Christy Turlington at Every Mother Counts and Bert Peterson at ACOG, and then our friends at USAID and Claudia Conlon. And we went into Zambia and Uganda in the 4 worst districts that you could be a mom, as measured by maternal mortality. But to your point, we found a bunch of grandmas and we gave them brand new bicycles and a really cool bright green polo shirt and kind of a wrap, that they would wear. And their job was to go out and find these young girls who were pregnant and be the healthcare messengers about, this is when you need to get in and get a prenatal checkup.
Right.
Now you need to take your baby in for a healthy baby check. Do not have this baby laying on the dirt floor, all of this stuff. But because it was a grandma, she was coming as the elder.
Right.
These girls listened to her.
Right.
They wouldn't listen to the healthcare worker, but they listened to grandma. So we just hired grandma.
Right.
And it worked.
Yeah. About building trust.
It worked great.
Yeah. Building trust. So
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Well, it's been amazing to spend some time with you. I'm curious, as a nonprofit that started in a garage and now has this just amazing success story that has, impacted lives of millions of people. I don't even know I don't know if you know the number of how many people that you've impacted, but in the millions, obviously. What advice would you give? I think about, there's 1.7 million nonprofits in the US. A vast majority are still in the garage. A lot of them won't make it out. And I know a lot of our listeners, we have people that listen to this from, I think, 114 countries now. What advice, because you've lived the journey, you passed that threshold of getting through the idea to scale. Any advice that you'd give to the small nonprofit today? I didn't prep you for this at all, so this is just whatever comes to mind, advice that you would give to a small nonprofit that has a great idea, doing important work, but is just still at that incubation phase.
Yeah, I think I would circle back to our first part of this conversation. Take the word nonprofit out of your vocabulary, because you're a startup, period. Right? Doesn't matter if you're making money, not making money. All the rules apply. So what would you do if you had a startup tech company? What would you do if you had a little restaurant in the back of a food truck and you want to get a land base? What would you do if you're starting? We found these guys the other day. They're actually making cloth out of milk, out of old spoiled milk. And I was like, damn, that's really incredible, right? What would you do if you're those guys? And those guys all will sit down and look at things and say, this is how you get from here to there at scale. You're going to need to take on. The hard thing about what we do as nonprofits is we don't have access to capital the way that everybody else does, right? So we can't go sell shares. You can't get a, Series B financing. You can't go down and issue bonds. Banks don't even really want to loan to you unless you got all kinds of warehouse or other assets that you can pledge against your loan. So it's harder, no question. But all the rest of the rules apply.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I would get out of that idea that, oh, well, we're different because we're nonprofit. It's like, no, you maybe have a tougher hill to climb, which means you just got to get better.
Yeah.
And so, if it's surrounding yourself by a bunch of people, business people who aren't going to do the standard nonprofit of, where are we going to have our gala and this and that and everything. It's like, no, here's how you manage capital. Here's how you manage human resources. Here's what you do with your information stack. Here's all of the things that I would have to do running a moving and storage company. This is what you have to do too.
Right.
Get that group of people around you. Look at Vistage or some other organization that does CEO advising and jump in with those people. Because, it's tough. I heard somebody say that if only 1 out of 700 new businesses make it, that's about the same for nonprofits. And If you got a really good idea, then give it your all and go after it. But go after it,
Yeah.
like you're
Be smart about it. Yeah.
yeah,
Like it really matters.
right.
Once in a while I reflect on what it would have been like back in 2000 when I accidentally took on the executive director role at the Boys and Girls Club. And I think now, not that I want to go and relive my 20s, because heaven forbid, although I'd rather actually relive my 20s than be 20 today. I think it's much harder to be 20 today. But back then, man, if I had ChatGPT to even be like, what are 20 other ways to think about this issue? Or what's some HR advice? Or how do I analyze this program? Or even the community assessment? I mean, there's a lot of hope, I think, for nonprofits that are under-resourced and, that don't have that access to capital to not succumb to just this like, oh, we have to do another gala. It's like, no, you've got a resource that you can ask for 50 other ways to generate income or to achieve your mission that don't look like the ways that nonprofits have always operated in the past. And that's the part where, I can worry about AI as much as the next person, but I also get really bullish that there's a lot of, to your point, going back to where we started, good people that exist in the world that want to do good. And that if you inspire them, if you, spark some imagination to accomplish something that makes a difference in the world, I think a lot of people will rise to that challenge.
I agree with you. The other word that you used earlier was curiosity. And I think it would be an interesting mind shift for us to stop worrying about the answer as much as we worry about how to ask the question.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? Because that's going to be the thing that determines whether you do get the right answer. And I think that was one of the things that I walked away from this, the Microsoft Elevate conference last week, thinking more about how do I train my people to be able to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the organizations was talking about having an organizational librarian that basically figures out, and they send you the prompts and you say, well, I'm looking for this, and they write the prompt. I don't know, but I think that that's the thing. We do it naturally. We don't do it here yet. And like, for example, if I was going to start a restaurant, I wouldn't go talk to a guy about a tow truck.
Right.
I'd want to find some other restaurant guys. Well, the same thing on the whole AI thing. I want to be able to ask the right questions because I know that if I don't, I'm not going to get the right answer. And that's the problem, right? So
yeah. I've worked in AI now for 7 or 8 years, and I realized that the delta between the organizations that really thrived in AI and those that didn't had very little to do. It has to do with data and models, but it has less to do with data and models than it does with people and culture. And we're so stuck on basically doing work in this kind of incremental way because that's the way we've always done it versus really exercising our imagination of what's possible. And so that tends to be something that I get called in to speak about a lot and write about a lot as well. So love that you're there and you're starting to ask better questions for your, with your team. And I absolutely believe that we have to prepare our future workforce to ask better questions more often than others.
Yeah. Yep. So that we know if we're getting the right advice, right? I mean, you think about that's a good thing for anybody who's leading any organization, coaching. It's not about let me tell you what you should do. It's about let me ask you some questions to figure out if you can get there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Ask the questions that are going to make you figure out the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, for what you're doing, for the impact that you're making in the world. When you see your father, thank him on behalf of the nonprofit community for being an inspiration of what could be and what, determination, hard work, but inspiration come together. We'll put links to Project C.U.R.E for people that want to know more information about what you do. And again, I just want to say thank you for being willing to share your story and really providing a story of inspiration for others to follow along.
Well, thank you. Thanks for doing this podcast, man. It's really been a lot of fun, and it's neat to see that we've got a very similar history and the path that got us here, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, Fundraising AI is a volunteer organization. So we now operate the largest largest attended. We have 12,000 people attend our virtual summit every year from 113 countries, no paid employees. It's just basically comes from the passion that good people will work with good people. And if we share our stories together, good things will happen. So you're definitely a part of that journey and that story now. So thank you so much.
I'm honored.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, and we'll be encouraging you from the side. Thanks so much, Doug.
Thanks, my friend.